prospect of a feast. Hiiaka kept her own courage at the fine point of seeming indifference. She also inspired her companions with the same feeling by the calm confidence displayed in her singing. Pau ke ahoi ke ka Hawaii lau o hilo, he lau ka pui mano ka ihona, he mano na ka Hawaii o kulaipo. He wai honoli'i, he pali o kamae, he pali no kulau ka hilo pali ku. Hapali wailuku he wan ke hele ia. He wane ke hialai wai o lama, he akakawia kawai pana yewa, o panewa nui moku lehua, o hia kupu hawe o i kaua. Lehua ula i kawia e kamanu, awa po, e popuna po hilo, i kawahi o ku aina, by panaewa. Ola iakini, ke a maila ke a hi'i. Translation. One's strength is exhausted, climbing. The countless valleys and ridges of Hilo, the streams without number of Kulaipo, the mighty water of Honoli'i, the precipice walls of Kamae'e, and the Pali of Ko'olau. Such a land is Hilo Paliku. The banks of Wailuku are walls, the road to its crossing but sandy the way of Waiolama. How cheery the pearl of these waters, great Panaewa, her parks of lehua, scraggy in growth yet scarlet atop, its nectar wrung out by the birds. Black night covers Puna and Hilo, a pall from the smoke of my homeland, by Panaewa. Here's food for me and mine, behold the blaze of the ovens. The last two lines are said to be the utterance of Panaewa, who feigned to regard the fires as those of his own people, who, in anticipation of an easy victory, had made ready their ovens to receive the bodies of Hiiaka and her party. Hiiaka bravely answered Panaewa, "O Panaewa, ohia loa, ohia uliuli ka ua, I mokupewa ia, e ka lao ke pakepa, a ka uka I heilila, ilihia I ka leo, Hio wale no." Translation. Panaewa, a tall ohia, the fruit red ripe in the rain, is vilely slashed with the stick of the mountaineer. It stands in upland hali. Terrific, the voice is terrific, yet it's merely a voice. The voice was threatening only because my servants reported that some people were trespassing. That set my tongue a-going about Poa and Taro. After all, it's a question of strength. Your valor is that must win for you a passage through this land of mine. This was Panaewa's ultimatum. Hiiaka accepted the defiance of Panaewa by chanting a solemn kahoahoa, which was at once a confident prediction of victory and an appeal to the gods. Polo akeau ikanahelehala, kua hulu Panaewa ikalau. Ino kamaha ka ohia ola e. Kukepa ka maha o ka lau. Ua puhina I ka wela ake aqua. Wawa hipuna o ka olo ka pohaku ia. I ka huna pa ia e ka wahine. Nanahu ahi ka papa owe. Momoku ahi puna hala ia pua. Uluaka na hele me ka lau. Ka ke kahiko ia o papalauhi. Ele kahiko e kuli kaua. Ka ia hea hala o kaliu. E nekala kamalama. Ona kakakapiko o hilo I ke wan. I hula sete ia akula e hulihia I kai. Ua wawahia. Ua nahaha. Ua hehela ka papa I puala I. Translation. Long is the reach of Kiao's palms. Bristly back Panaewa's woodlands. Spoiled are the restful groves of La'a. Ragged and patchy the tree clumps. Gray their heads from the ravage of fire. A blanket of smoke covers Puna, all paved with the dump from her stone yard. The goddess's fire bites Olu'eye, one cinder heap clean to Apua, food for her oven are wildwood and brush, the finish that to Lauahi's glory. Her robe now is changed to jetty black. At the onset of Kulilikaua, Kalu's palms plucked root and branch. The sun and the moon are blotted out. Hilo is shaken to its foundation, its lands upheaved, despoiled to the sea, shattered, fissured, powdered, reduced. Its plain is ashes and dust. The battle that ensued when Panaewa sent to the attack his nondescript pack of mo'o, dragon-like anthropoids, the spawn of witchcraft, inflamed with the spite of demons, was hideous and uncanny. Tooth and claw ran amok. Flesh was torn, limbs ran apart, blood ran like water. If it had been only a battle with enemies in the open, Hiiaka would have made short work of the job. Her foes lay ambushed in every wood and brake and assumed every imaginable disguise. A withered bush, a bunch of grass, a moss-grown stone, any the most innocent object in nature, might prove to be an assailant ready to spit venom or tear with hook and talon. Hiiaka had need of every grain of wit and every spark of courage in her nature. Nothing could withstand her onset, and the billows of attack against her person were broken as by a solid rock. Some described her as wielding a flaming battle axe and hurling missiles of burning sulfur. They might well be deceived. The quickness of her every motion was a counterfeit of the riving blade or blazing fireball. Some assert that, in her frenzy, she tore with her teeth and even devoured the reeking flesh until her stomach rose in rebellion. Such a notion seems incompatible with the violence of her disgust for the reptilian blood that besmeared her from soul to crown. Pau-o-palai, using her magical pau as a besom of destruction, was transformed into a veritable Bellona, and Wahine-o-ma'o displayed the courage of an Amazon. These both escaped serious injury. The unhappy fate of Papulahu realized that girl's premonition. She fell into the hands of the enemy, and as if to fulfill the prediction of Pele, became food for the gods of Panaewa. As Hiiaka glanced heavenward, she saw the zenith filled with cloud forms, Cain, Kanaloa, Kamohoali, Pohakau, and others, encouraging her with their looks. The sight, while it cheered, wrung from her a fervent prayer. Kuai-he-lani. Na-maka-o-ka-ha'i. Hikaukau, aloha kea ia oi. Ia oi no i. Translation: yon group of God forms that float and sail with the clouds heaven high, mustered and led by Pohakau. This prayer is a love call to you. Our sister is in trouble, said Kamohoali. Let us go to her assistance. Such was the call of Kamohoali when he saw his little friend and quondam protege Hiiaka in trouble. And theirs were the god forms that sailed through the sky to reinforce her. Hiiaka's battle with Panaewa. The bird spies sent out by Panaewa brought back contradictory reports. The first pair reported that Hiiaka was being worsted. Soon after, another pair, garbling the facts, said, our people are lying down, but they are still alert and keep their eyes open. As for Hiiaka, she has fallen into a deep sleep. The situation was far from satisfactory, and Panaewa dispatched another pair of birds to reconnoiter and report. It was not yet morning, and the night was dark, and they accordingly took the form of kukui trees, thinking thus to illuminate the scene of operations. The intelligence they brought was confounding. Our people, they said, are all dead, save those who have the form of kukui trees. Hiiaka lies quietly sleeping in the road. This account, though strictly in accord with the facts, was so disconcerting to Panaewa that he burst forth in a rage. Slaves, liars, you're deceiving me. I'll wring your necks. And he reached out to execute his threat. The birds eluded him and found safety in flight. Panaewa now saw that it was necessary to take the field in person at the head of his regular forces, composed of the Namu and Nawa. The disguise he chose for himself was that of an Ohia lahua tree. No sooner had he taken that form than he found himself unable to move hand or foot. A parasitic network of ie embraced his body, and a multitude of aerial roots anchored him to the spot. It was the craft of the sleeping girl that had done this. He had to content himself with the unwarlike guise of the kukui tree. While Hiiaka slept, her faithful servitor Pau-o-palai kept open eye and detective ear to what was going on in the starlit forest about them. At the first glimmering of dawn, her keen sense felt, rather than heard, a murmurous rustle that broke the stillness in a movement, as if the forest itself were advancing and closing in upon them. This oncoming of the enemy was in such contrast to the onset of the yelping pack on the previous day as to be most impressive. The sound that touched her keen sense was not the joyous twitter and stir of nature preparing to greet a new day. It was rather the distant mutter of the storm, soon to be heard as the growl of the tempest or the roar and snarl of an enraged menagerie of wild beasts. The woman felt her responsibility, and, with the double intent of summoning to their aid the friendly gods and of waking Hiiaka, she lifted a solemn prayer. Kulia e uli kapule kalamaola, kulia imua ike kahuna te, kulia ike alohilani, e ui aku ana au, I kupua olunani, e oai kupua olunani, e o iliulio kalani. O ilio ehu, o ilio mea, o kalani, o kukeauki, o kukeau poko, o kukeau loa kea, o kukeau avihivihi, ula o kalan, waka waka hiwai, anahualitov, o nekapali makowawa, o kupina e o kuwawa, o kuhaili mof, o ha'iha ilawa hes, o maokeali he, sanaka loloa o ka mauna, o kupulupulu I ka nahele, o na akua mai ka waokele, o kulipe nuia I ahua, o kikeala naming stew, o ka wahi no elehua, o ke kahuna I ka puoko o ke ahi, o imi o lalama, kui ke ahi ka hekili, nei ke olai, ola pa ka uila, lohe o kane hekili, vesi, iki ke malama ia ka uloa, elua wahi nei hele ka hiki na ka la, o kumukahi, lawa o hai and tiet. Hai ka moe, o ka pulaki nau heali, e hoi I komo I ko hale, o ke alohilani e awau I ko ki o wai kapu, o pona hake one. E inu I kupu awa hiwa, o papa ake aqua, I ka nae no moe haunai ki e. Hele e a komo, I ka hale o Pele, uahuahua I ka hiki lapa uila. Pele I huaina hoi na e ena. Ka mana o ko aqua Iwahola e o kukulu ka pahu ka pua ka leo. Ho kiki trinitanawai. He kua a kanawai. Hi kai o kia kanawai. Hi alamuku no keimi kanaloa. Hi ki hoi kanawai. No Pele no ko aqua la I translation. Stand in the breach, O Uli, give heed to this plea for life. To the front at the call of thy priests. Come in the splendor of heaven. I entreat these powers on high. And who are these beings of might? Ye somber clouds that rampart the sky, ye warm clouds and ye that gleam ruddy, ye clouds that guard heaven's border, ye clouds that model the heavenly vault, ye clouds that embank the horizon, ye cloud piles aglow in the sunlight. Descend, O rain, O water pour, torrential rush of the princes, rent be the wall of the crater, let its groans reach O and fly. Come, Ku, who fashions the landscape, she who crushes the leaves of a hia, goddess who guards the outer flame tip, ye tall ones who dwell in the forest, Ku, the hirsute god of the wilds, with his fellows who carve the canoe, come bent-kneed terrace consumer, with crash and groan of lava plate, and reeking smoke that glooms the forest, come, Lord of the ruddy flame, fire tongues that search and spread, fire shafts that smite and crash. Let earthquake groan and lightning flash. Cain, the god of lightning, shall hear, and warm this frigid month Ulua. 2 women go to the sun's east gate, to rouse goddess Kapo from sleep, she of the black-spotted red robe. O Kapo, re-enter your sun temple, and bathe in your sacred water pool, round as a gourd, scooped in the sand. Drink from your black-polished awa cup, dark awa that's offered to the gods, to placate the goddess of gentle snore. Then enter the house of Pele. Pele once burst forth at Kahiki. Once again, O Pele, break forth, display thy power, my God, to the world. Let thy voice sound out like a drum, ruder the law of thy burning back, that thy dwelling is sacred apart, that Cain and Loa have limits, that fixed and firm are Pele's laws, for Pele, great Pele, is my God. The sisters, uncles, aunts, and other kindred of Hiiaka heard this prayer of Pau-o-Pala'e distinctly enough, and so did Pele. And when they saw that she appeared indifferent and made no move, they muttered among themselves. Then Kuai-he-lani, a man of war and a leader in battle, spoke up and addressing Ka-moho-ali said, "Why is it that she does not send warriors to the assistance of her sister? The girl has fought most bravely all day and is worn out, and there she lies fast asleep." Ka-moho-ali thereupon bade Kilio'i-Kapua and Oluwale-Malo, two handsome lads who were very dear to Pele, Pele, her sons in fact, to go in to Pele and ask her sanction to their going to the aid of Hiiaka. When these two boys came into Pele's presence, they found her poking the fire with a stick, Holo Kapuahi. With a fine show of confidence, they at once went and seated themselves in Pele's lap, one on her right thigh and one on her left. Pele's look softened as she contemplated them. Tears gathered in her eyes, and she said, "What is the thought in the heart? Speak. Ha'ika your commands. Oka-leo, literally the voice." At this, Pele stood up and, leaving her own home hearth, went over and took her station in the fire pit of Hale Ma'o. Then, pointing to the east, she said, "Oka-leo o ke kanaka-hukahi, mai luna mai, mai loko mai o-ka-leo ka-manu, o huli ke inua kain, e we he ka-lani, ha-mama-ka-honua. O wela kahi ki kume kahi ki moe. Ala mai o ka-mohoali, e moe ana I loko ke apolohiwa. E kue e hoi ka mama I ka-lani, e kue e hoi ke ola ia Hiiaka ka polio Pele. Ola loa no, It was such a voice of utterance as this Leo that the two boys who went in before Pele desired. These two messenger boys, by the way, are in another account spoken of as birds. The purpose of Cain in sending out this Leo seems to have been to rouse into activity the earth strata Na-pa-pa-hanua. Translation, the voice from above of a man supreme, flies east, flies west in the cry of a bird. Curl over, thou yeasty billow of Cain. Be rent, O heaven, and quake, O earth. Kahiki's pillars, flame ye and burn. Ka-moho-ali doth wake and rise. From his couch on banks of purple cloud, to heaven return with thy tabu, O Ku, salvation, O Ku, for Hiiaka. Hiiaka, the darling of Pele, immortal life to her. At this, the gods of war sprang into array as if unleashed by the words of Pele. At their head marched Kuai-he-lani, a veteran who had followed Pele in her voyage from Kahiki. With him went Kekako'i, a guide Hukeli well acquainted with the forest trails. In the van strode three weird figures, Kamayao, Kahini-hini, and Mapu, bearing conchs, to which they ever and anon applied their lips and sent forth resounding blasts. But even more thrilling and inspiring than the horns of Triton was the voice of these gods of war as they chanted their war song. Melekai kawa, hulihia kamona, wela ike ahi. Wela mono puka uka o kuihanale, ike apoha kupule na elele mai iuka. O ke kako e ka hokele mai ka lua. O ka maiau kani polole, kani leelea, kani kua mauna. Ahuli hia ikale ula ikale lani akapukua aka ake ahua lono e lono nei e hukuli. E hukuli ika uwalo. E hele no hi. Translation. The mount is convulsed, it belches flame. Fire scorched is upland kui hanale. A hail of stones shot out with sulfur blasts. Kako'i guides the warrior van, the rousing peals of pearly conch and thrilling notes of woodland shells stir every heart with tuneful cheer. Heaven's blue is turmoil with fire clouds, boiling fountains of flame and cinder, such the form we give to our message. Will he heed it or turn a deaf ear? Ah, you see, he scorns our entreaty. Be valiant! Now forward to battle. He. Thus chanting their battle, mele kai kawa. These gods of an old-time mythology marched or flew with resolute purpose to their task of rescuing Hiiaka and her little band, and of ridding the land at one and the same stroke of their old entrenched foe, Pana-ewa. Heaven and earth stirred at their onset. The visible signs of their array were manifest in columns of seething fire-shot clouds that hovered like vultures over the advancing army. Arrived at striking distance, they let loose their lightning bolts and sounded their thunder gongs. Earth and heaven at once became turmoiled in one confused whirl of warring elements. The warriors of Pana-ewa, who, in imitation of their chief, had for the most part taken the guise of trees and other natural objects, found themselves from the first fettered and embarrassed by a tangle of parasitic vines, so that their thrusts against Hiiaka were of little avail. Now comes the onset of the Pele gods in the tempest forms of hurricane, lightning, hail, and watery cloudbursts that opened heaven's floodgates. Against these elemental forces, the dryad forms of Pana-ewa's hosts could not stand for a moment. Their tree shapes were riven and torn limb from limb, engulfed in a swirling tide that swept them down to the ocean and far out to sea. Two staunch fighters remained, Kiha, who had chosen to retain the honest dragon form, and Pualoa, a creature like Kamapua in the demi-shape of a boar, whom Pana-ewa, at the scent of disaster, had thrust into the confinement of a secret cave. This manner of retreat saved the twain from the immediate disaster by flood, but not from the vengeance of Pele's army. Detected in their lairs, they were slain, and their petrified bodies are pointed out to this day in verification of this story. The fate of Pana-ewa himself was most tragical. He no sooner had taken the form of a kukui tree than he found himself overlaid and entangled with meshes of parasitic growth. He could neither fight nor fly. The spot on which he stood sank and became a swamp, a lake, a sink. The foundations on which its bottom rested were broken up and fell away. Pana-ewa, swallowed up in the gulf, was swept out to sea and perished in the waves. Kain-Luhonua had broken up the underlying strata and made of the place a bottomless sink. A reef is pointed out in the ocean opposite Papat, which is the remains of the body of the mole Pana-ewa. The part taken by Hiiaka in this last act of her deliverance was hardly more than that of a spectator. She had but to look on and witness the accomplishment of her own salvation. Having been roused from the refreshment of sleep by the long-drawn recitative of Pa'opala'es, she did her best to cheer her two companions with assurances of coming deliverance, and gathering her little brood about her, after the manner of a mother hen figuratively, bade them cling to her, nestle under her wings, lest they should be swept away in the flood of waters that soon began to surge about them, a flood which carried far out to sea the debris of battle as already described. The victory for Hiiaka was complete. Hawaii for once and for all time was rid of that pestilential man-eating mole band headed by Pana-ewa, who, from the time of Pele's coming, had remained entrenched in the beautiful forest land that still bears the name Pana-ewa. Hiiaka has various adventures. The shark Makau-Q. At one stroke, the benign action of the heavenly powers had freed a fair land from a pestilential mole band, disinfected it of the last shred and fragment of their carcasses, and ushered in a reign of peace in the wooded parks and tangled forests of Pana-ewa. Hiiaka could afford to celebrate her victory by recuperating her powers in well-earned repose, while she thus lay in profound sleep on the purified battlefield. Her two companions busied themselves in preparing such simple refreshment as the wilderness afforded. The pièce de résistance of this dinner of herbs was luau, the favorite food of the Pele family. When the women had finished the task of collecting, sorting, making into bundles, and cooking the delicate leaves of kalo, Hiiaka still slept. Pa'opale thereupon took her station at the feet of her mistress and chanted the dinner call in the form of a gentle serenade. Eala, eala, eala ehika-lani. Iala ikehoiruai-ka-lani. Iala ihumau. Wahina makali. Layala, translation. O daughter of heaven, Awake, awake, Hiiaka, awake, sender of winter rain, guardian of womanly rights, spouse of God, Maka-li, awake thee, wake. The luau must be burnt to a crisp, Hiiaka said as she sat up. As Hiiaka and her companions again wended their way through the forest, it was evident that its innocent creatures had unjustly suffered in company with their guilty invaders, and time had not yet sufficed for the exercise of that miracle of tropic repair which quickly heals and covers the damage done by a tempest. Broken limbs, fallen trees, and twisted vines still blocked the narrow trails, while here and there an uprooted forest giant, in unseemly fashion, obtruded a Medusa head of tawny roots in place of its comely coronal of leaves. In their journey they came at length to a place, Na-maka-o-ka-ha'i, where the road seemingly ended abruptly in a precipice with the ocean dashing wildly at its base. The alternative open to their choice was to seek out some roundabout inland way, or to take the shorter route and swim the ocean-made gap. The two women, Wahino Ma'o taking the lead, proposed as a diversion to swim the ocean and thus avoid a long and wearisome detour. Hiiaka strenuously vetoed the proposition, but the two women, not yet trained to subordinate their will and judgment to the decision of the leader, persisted. Hiiaka thereupon took a stem of the ti plant and, peeling off its rusty bark, left it white and easily visible. I will throw this stick into the water, said she, and if it disappears, we will not make of this an o-hula-ana one, but if it remains in sight, then we will swim across this wild piece of water. It seemed to Hiiaka that her companions displayed a masculine stubbornness and unreasonableness, a criticism which she uttered in her chanting way. O maka-hula-ana! Kai koka pali piha-piha o elele. Ke kai o makao-kiu aole au e hopo I ka loa. Ohono ka neiki. A kain la olua, a wahin la wau-e translation. To swim this tossing sea, while waves are lashing the cliff, and the ocean rages high, at Elilo, the haunt of the shark, I balk not the length of the road. By Hono Kane Iki, be you too stubborn as men, let me be guideful as woman. Hiiaka then threw the peeled stick into the ocean, and in a moment it was snatched out of sight. There, if we were to swim, we would be seized and eaten by Maka-o-ka-ha'i. When you tossed the stick into the ocean, the sea moss covered and concealed it, and you thought it was the work of a shark, was the reply of Wahino Ma'o. Again they made ready to plunge into the sea. Hiiaka threw another stick, and that too was instantly swallowed, whereupon she chanted again, Hokuku kauhulana o kapali. Ke pue ala ekekaya nalo ka auki. Hia kolalo, hia o maka-o-ka-ha'i, maka-o-ka-ha'i ho'i. Translation. Have done with this foolhardy swim. The ocean just gulps down the stick. A monster fish dwells in the depth. That monster shark, Maka-o-ka-ha'i. Aye, the shark god Maka-o-ka-ha'i. The women were not yet convinced and still persisted, a stubbornness that drew from Hiiaka another remonstrance. Mihi wahimahu lao, kolalo kakaauki, a Maka-o-ka-ha'i, hikiuhi alele aloha, ea I o ne I. Translation, a seething whirl of ocean mist marks the place where I cast a stick. 'Tis the work of the lurking shark, your loving guard, your faithful spy, that is my service to you. At these words, the huge form of the shark rose to the surface, and the women, convinced at last, leaped out of the water and abandoned their purpose. Hiiaka now gave battle to the shark, and that was the end of one more power of evil, the rout of the Mahiki. The location of the adventure with the shark god Maka-o-ka-ha'i was at the mouth of Waipio Valley, a region where Hawaii's storm coast forms an impassable rampart, save as it is cut by this, in its twin valley, Waimanu. These valleys take head in a wild forest region, the home of mist, rain, and swamp. Adjoining this, and part of the same watershed, is the region known as Mahiki Waina, a land which the convenience of traffic required should be open to travel. It was the haunt of a ferocious horde of moa called Mahiki, from their power to leap and spring like grasshoppers. When Hiiaka proposed to pass through this region in the ordinary course of travel, the head of the Mahiki insolently denied her the right of way, suggesting as an alternative the boisterous sea route around the northern shoulder of Hawaii. Hiiaka's blood was up. The victory over the hosts of Panaewa and the more recent destruction of Maka-o-ka-ha'i had fired her courage. She resolved once for all to make an end of this arrogant nuisance and to rid the island of the whole pestilential brood of imps and mo'o. Standing on a height that overlooked Waipio, she chanted a mele which is at once descriptive of the scene before her and at the same time expressive of her determination. Meleuhau, alunao Waipio, kilohi akuku maka-ilalo. Hele hoi ke ala maka-o-ka-ha'i. Hele hoi ke ala maka-o-ka-pua. Pia pia hi ka welo welo. Kapu kolea I ka ino mahiki. Wa ike ka hoi au he ino mahiki. He ino loa no e. Translation. As I journeyed above YPO, mine eyes drank in that valley. The whole long march as far as from the sea fight at Maka-o-ka-ha'i till the trail climbs Kapua, there sagi the road and glary, and there do flaunt and flourish. On Plover Mount the cursed Mahiki. For I am convinced that that crew are bad as bad can be. Hiiaka's march to encounter the Mahiki was interrupted for a short time by an incident that only served to clinch her resolution. An agonizing cry of distress assailed her ear. It came from a dismantled heap of human flesh, the remains of two men who had been most brutally handled by these same Mahiki. Perhaps their leg and arm bones plucked out, and they left a welter in their misery. It was seemingly the cruel infliction of the Mahiki. The cry of the two wretches could not be disregarded. E Hiiaka, e Kapoli, o Pele, e Ikimai, o Iamawa, e ka hukuli I ka ualo, I ka opu aloha ole, I. Translation. O Hiiaka of Pele's heart, come thou and assist us. Turn not a deaf ear to our cry. Be not of hard and unfeeling heart. Hiiaka, with a skill that did credit to her surgery, splinted the maimed limbs, inserting stems from her favorite ti plant to take the place of the long bones that had been removed. She left them seated in comfort at the roadside at Pololu. The Mahiki, on seeing Hiiaka advance into their territory, threw up the dirt and dust in their front. To express their contempt for such an insignificant body of trespassers, Hiiaka, paying no attention to their insolence, pressed on. Her purpose was to strike directly at Mo'olau, the leader of the horde, to whom she addressed this incantation. Aloko au Mahiki, halawai meke akua okioki po. Okioki ino laiko napo, kahihi ai laiko nanau. Wale mai ana ikona koko ione, elawe. No ke ala, I hele akuho'i, e. Translation. I enter the land of Mahiki. I counter the head hunting witch. See me pluck the head from her body. See me tear out her very heart. Till her blood surges round me in waves. Blood of the monster that's legion. Mine is the common right of way. The traveler's right to the road. At dark, Hiiaka camped in the road, and during the night a female kupua named Lau Mihi, whom the Mahiki chief had sent as a spy to watch Hiiaka, was seen standing on a high place to one side of them. Hiiaka at once flew at her and put an end to her. Now began a fierce battle between Hiiaka and the Mahiki dragon and his forces. They fought till both sides were exhausted and then, as if by mutual consent, stopped to rest. Hiiaka perceived that the battle was to be even more fiercely contested than that at Panaewa. She bade Pau-o-Pala to take good care that no ill came to Wahine Ma'o. Looking up into the heavens, Hiiaka saw her relatives and friends Pohakau, Kamohali, Kan Milohai, and a large concourse of other gods, including Kane, Kanaloa, Ku, and Lono, watching her, evidently greatly interested in her performances. They assured her of their protection. At this, Hiiaka was much encouraged and gave utterance to her feelings in this kanene. Amulau, I kapua o ka ohiuhi. Helele mai ana kapua o kokolau. Lohia e na molili keala. E kolo e ke kula, e iho I kai o ka waihae la. Hea e la ka mulili I hakakakawa, paio o lua awani, hi kau mo lao, o mo lao akua, translation, in the wilds of mo lao. The uhiuhi's time for bloom. The petals fall of Kulau's flower. The little dragons have found the way by which they can crawl to the plain, go down to the sea at Kuai-he. The little demons now announce that you and I shall battle wage. We too indeed must fight, they say. A god is Mo'olao, a host of gods. At this the great dragon Mo'olao bestirred himself. His attack was direct, but he divided his host into 2 columns so as to envelope Hiiaka and attack her on each flank. Hiiaka saw them approaching through the jungle and chanted the following rallying song. Mele ho ululu, amulau I kapua o ka uhiuhi, palaluhi e huihula, kapua ke kaunoa kala. Nahale ohai I ke kaha o wakiu. E kiu, ia awane ko ahiahi, e makaya o lua awane. Hi akua mulau o mulau akua e. Translation. In the jungle of Mo'olao, the uhi's season of bloom, the flower of the rootless kaunoa is wilted and bent in the sun. My bower and kekaha's invaded. Some creature is playing the spy. I, in turn, be warned, will spy out your quiet and rest of an evening. This to you, God Mo'olao. Pele, perceiving that the crisis of the conflict had now come, called upon all the male and female relatives of Hiiaka Hoaiku to go to her assistance. Go and help your sister Hiiaka. There she is, fighting desperately with Mo'olao, fighting and resting, well nigh exhausted. Go and help her. All of you go. It's a fight against Mo'olao. When the battalion of gods moved against the Mo'o, it was a rout and a slaughter. Then the cry arose, no fight has been made against the Mahiki dragon, he yet survives. Thereupon they turned their attack against that old dragon and his guards. Hiiaka then celebrated the double victory in this paean. Kaikupu moyawa wawakalau. Neopo waima nahaka welo hina e hoi. E pu waima e ke hololai mikialoalo. E na wai kamake. K-I-O-N-E. Translation. A roar as of surf on the hill Mo'awa. The tumult resounds through the forest. Pu'uai and his band lead the rout. Your battalions are torn into tatters. You are running, Captain Owai, and you, Captain Spry, who's the defeat? The answer is made by the shouting. Hiiaka's chief weapon of attack seems to have been her magical pow. With this as a besom, she beat them down as a husbandman might beat down a swarm of locusts. The Mahiki and the Mo'olao had ceased to exist as organized bodies, but from the rout and slaughter of the armies many individuals had escaped with their lives, and these had hid themselves away in caves and secret places. Some of them even, presuming apparently upon their power of disguise, had taken refuge in the remote, scattered habitations of the people. Such an inference seems to be justified by the language of the Malay now to be given. Note, the gods that came to the assistance of Hiiaka such times as circumstances pinched her and whose spiritual power at all times reinforced her feeble humanity were limited in their dominion to certain vaguely defined provinces and departments. Thus, if there was any sea fighting to be done, it fell to the shark god, the Admiral Kaumoho Ali, to take charge of it. On the other hand, the conduct of a battle on terra firma would be under the generalship of Kane Mailohai, while to Kanaloa belonged the marshalling of the celestial host, the moon and the stars. But the orb of day, the sun, belonged to Lono. Hence, if the fighting was during the hours of daylight, Lono would logically assume the command. The rule of the great god Ku was also exercised principally by day. It was he who arranged the calendar and settled the order of the seasons, the days and the nights. The subdivisions and departmental complications under these general divisions were numerous. Liloipuna, liloipuna, liloipuna ike o akahewa-hewa, popoi aku kai nahale. Uapihan nahale o kini akwa waimea, o kalehu akwa o mana, iniwale waimea. Ikapie o ke kua o uli e powale mahiki. Aya mahiki ki uwala no. Scattered through Puna is the route of the vagrant imps. They swarm in the dwellings of men. The houses are lousy with demons. Waimea's myriads of godlings. Thy 400,000 mana. Waimea thrills with the snarl of witch gods. Night shadows brood over Mahiki. The uproar keeps on in Mahiki. Hiiaka loops back in her journey. Hiiaka, having thus far, as it would seem, journeyed along the western coast of Hawaii, now loops back in her course and travels in the direction of Hilo by the way of Hamakua for the seeming purpose of completing her work of extermination. Like a wise general, she would leave no enemies in her rear. When they came into the neighborhood of Wahine Omao's home, that girl spoke up and said, "I think we had better take another road. If we keep to this one which passes by my door, my parents, who will be watching for me, will see me and will want me to remain with them." This she said by reason of her great desire to continue in Hiiaka's company. True enough, when they caught sight of her old home, there sat her mother Punahoa and her father Kaipalaoa. "There they sit," said the girl. "If they recognize me, they will want to keep me." Hiiaka bade Wahine Omao fall in behind her, hunch her shoulders, bend forward her head, and walk with short and firm steps in imitation of an old woman. Hiiaka, on coming close to the old people, using the language of song, asked directions as to the road. "E Punahoi Kaipalaoa, ai Na-maka-o-ka-ha'i, e nonohomala'i au hea-ka-ala'i." Translation: O Punahoa and Kaipalaoa, you with the clear scanning eyes, sitting at rest before me, point me out now the road. The road is plain enough. You are taking the right way. We are looking at that young woman of your party. She has such a strong resemblance to our missing daughter, save her way of shuffling and holding her head. On reaching the outskirts of the village of Hilo, Hiiaka found a rickety footbridge consisting of a single narrow and wobbly plank, liable to turn at every step and precipitate the passenger into the tumbling waters below, and this was the only passage across the rocky chasm of the Wailuku River. This precarious crossing was the work of two sorcerers, degenerate nondescripts, who had the audacity to levy toll for the use of their bridge, in default of which the traveler suddenly found himself precipitated into the raging water. By virtue of their necromantic powers, they had the presumption to claim spiritual kinship with Hiiaka, a bond the woman could not absolutely repudiate. "Here comes our Mo'opuna," Tu called out Piliamo to his companion. "Well, what of it? She will have to pay her fare the same as anyone else," replied Noho'amo. "Only on that condition shall she cross by our bridge." On Hiiaka's attempting to cross without paying toll, the two sorcerers would, following their own practice, have disarranged the treacherous plank and precipitated her and her party into the raging stream. "Well said," Noho'amo replied, "provided she will consent to it." Hiiaka now called to them in the language of song, "Ka huli huli e, ka papa o Wailuku, ka huli o Apua. Ha mai o Maukele. Heole ke kaha kuai ai e homai ka ai homai hoi kai e ai aina aku hoi e." Translation: Cranky Cranky the bridge across the Wailuku, upset is Apua. Makele declares that the barter of food is naught. Give us then of your food. Give us something to eat. Let us partake of your meat. To this unusual demand they replied, "Indeed, do you imagine we will do any such thing as that? It is not for us to give to you. You must give us the fare before you cross on our bridge. We don't give away things for nothing." Hiiaka replied by repeating her request in nearly the same words, Ka huli huli I, ka papa o luku. Hi ole ke kaha koaia e homai kaia, homai ana hoi kaia. I aina aku ho I. Translation. Unstable the bridge that spans the Wailuku. This barter of fish is a fraud. Give us of your fish. Grant us kindly some meat. Give us something to eat. Hiiaka repeated her demands in varying form, with no other effect than to make the toll keepers more stubborn in their ridiculous demands. Not even when Hiiaka, as if to cap the climax of their absurdity, ended her demand with this ironical request. Homai hoi kawaii inu ia aku hoi I. Translation. Give us of this water. Give us water to drink. Hiiaka now openly denounced the two sorcerers as being simply Mo'o in disguise, entirely wanting in those generous feelings that belong to godhood. These creatures are simply Mo'o. If I attack them, they will run for their lives. The people, failing to recognize Hiiaka as their deliverer, spiritless from long habituation to the fraudulent dominion of these impostors, fearful also of their vengeance, stoutly opposed Hiiaka, affirming that Pili-a-mo'o and Noho-a-mo'o were gods in reality, having great power and capable of doing many wonderful things. They declared their readiness to back their opinion with their property, yes, with their lives. They were at length persuaded, however, to accept as decisive the test proposed by Hiiaka, namely that, if they fled when attacked, they should cease to be regarded as gods and should be dealt with as impostors. True to Hiiaka's prediction, the Mo'o, in abject fear, turned and fled for their lives at her first threatening move, and she now called upon the people to pursue and destroy them. Na-maka-o-ka-ha'i I ka lehua. Mai ka nukua ka manua puna hoa e. Hoa yehola ka o kanaka. Ipa opahea wane. Hina I ka lua kanaka. He kanaka. He mauakua I translation. The neck of Hilo is heavy, weighted with wreaths of lewa, from bird beak clean down to the feet. Catch and bind these robbers of men. Bind them fast, lest they slip through your hands and escape to the robber pit. These mortals who call themselves gods. The meaning of the figure in the first two verses, though obscure, seems to be that Hilo, so rich in natural beauty, is by that very fact robbed of the energy to defend herself and cast off the incubus that oppresses her. As the creatures fled from Hiiaka's pursuit, their human disguise fell from them, and their real character as Mo'o was evident. We've committed a great blunder, said Pili-a-mo'o to his mate. It looks as if she meant to kill us. Let us apologize for our mistake and conciliate her with fair words. Noho-a-mo'o agreed to this and, turning to Hiiaka, made this wheedling speech. Kupu mai kai aela, ka wahine o ka lua. Ua ia iholai ka ua. Akili na he ka maka lehua mau. Mauka o e hele ai. Maka hawawai. E waiho ke ala no maua. No na kupuna, translation. She has grown a fine figure. Our girl from the fire pit. The plentiful rain has made bright this bud of upland lehua. Pray choose your road farther inland. That way will offer good fordage. This road leave to your ancient kin. Hiiaka spared not, but pursued them to their cavernous rock heaps in which they thought to hide themselves, and, having seized them, rent them asunder jaw from jaw. Thus did Hiiaka add one more to the score of her victories in the extermination of the Mo'o. Chapter 14. Hiiaka meets Mother Grundy. It was at this point of the journey that Hiiaka lost the attendance of her sympathetic companion and faithful servant, Pa'o-palai. She was persuaded to unite her fortunes with those of a man from Kohala named Paki, and we must leave unanswered the question, how she finally settled with Pele this apparent desertion of the trust with which she had been charged, that of acting as aide, kahu, to Hiiaka. Wahino Ma'o now remains as the sole companion of Hiiaka in her future adventures. On resuming the journey, they came before long to the broad stream of Honolii, which was swimming deep in the lack of other means of crossing, they bundled their clothes, held them above their heads with one hand, and easily made the opposite shore by swimming with the aid of the other hand. At the sight of this performance, the ghost god Hina-Hina-Kui-ka-pali and her companion, in a spirit of pure fault-finding and mother grundyism, exclaimed, "Popo-ke-kapo-ka-wahine. Okohanawai ho-wa-wai-o honoli e kapu'oi he mau ali. He mau ali no Hina-Hina-Kui-ka-pali." Translation: the women bundle their garments, and naked they swim the stream, the water of Honoli'i, an action quite unseemly. "'Tis a slur on your noble rank. I too am a chief, my name, Hina-Hina gem of the cliff." "For shame," said Hiiaka. "These ghost gods have been spying on our nakedness, and now they make sport of us." A great fear came upon the ghosts that the dread goddess would seize them and pinch out their atomy spark of existence. In their terror they flew home and, perched on the shoulders of their mother, besought her to interpose in their behalf and appease Hiiaka by a suitable offering of luau. "There burns a fire," said Wahine-Mau as they drew near the house. "The fire of the ovens built by the ghosts," Hiiaka answered. "They have saved themselves from death." By the time they reached the house, the luau was done to a turn and the tables were spread. Wahine-Mau made an oblation to the gods and then ate of the viands. Hiiaka did not partake of the food. Hiiaka now spent several days at Honokane in Kohala, anxiously awaiting the departure of some canoe by which she might pass over to the island of Maui. While thus absorbed in a sentimental mood, looking one day across the ocean at the misty outline of the distant land, she saw a man of remarkable appearance strike out from one headland of the bay to swim to the opposite point. Her admiration for his physical beauty and his daring performance drew from her a song, "Ai-ai-o, eo makaio-ka-hula-ana, kaikoa, ai piho-piho ai-lele ke kaio makaukiu. Awo-pohopo ana i ke loa o hono kaneiki. Ike inoe ai wahine au." Translation: my heart beats high at your venture. To buffet the raging sea, wild heave the waves, neath the cliff wall, to be whelmed by ocean's might, the ocean of Maka-o-ka-ha'i. My heart forgets to beat at sight of your rashness, Honokane. Would you were the man, the woman I... Honokane heard, of course, the words that were uttered in his praise, and being a man of chivalrous instincts as well as of honor, he invited Hiiaka and Wahine-Mau to enjoy the hospitalities of his home. As they sat at a feast spread in her honor, Hiiaka, as was her wont, bowed her head in prayer with closed eyes, and the others did likewise, and when they opened their eyes and looked, the portion that had been set before Hiiaka was gone, spirited away. In the evening it was announced that a canoe was to sail in the early morning on a voyage to Maui, whereupon Hiiaka secured the promise of a passage for herself and Wahine-Mau. Chapter 15. The Voyage to Maui. Hiiaka's voyage across the all-Nui-Ha-ha Channel, considered merely as a sea adventure, was a tame experience. There was no storm, no boisterous weather, sea as calm as a mill pond, nothing to fill up the imagination with a sense of excitement or danger. Yet it was far from being an agreeable experience to the young woman who was now having her first hand-to-hand tussle with the world. They had spent the night at the house of one Piikianui in the early morning, their host, and a younger man, apparently his son, named Piiki-Eki, made ready their canoe to sail for Maui. Hiiaka, assuming that passage would be granted both of them, in accordance with a promise made the previous day, stood ready against the hour of departure. At the last moment, the younger man having assisted Wahine-Mau, Hiiaka, assuming that passage would be granted both of them, in accordance with a promise made the previous day, stood ready against the hour of departure. At the last moment, the younger man, having assisted Wahine-Mau to her seat in the bow next to himself, called to his elder, "Piikianui, why don't you show your passenger to her seat, the one next you?" "I won't do it," Piikianui answered groudily. I find that the canoe will be overloaded if we take passengers aboard, and all our landlord's freight will get wet. The real reason for this volte-face on the part of the old sailor was that he had made an unseemly proposition to Hiiaka the night before, and she had repelled him. Wahine-o-mao thereupon left her seat, and the canoe started without them. It was not more than fairly underway, however, when a violent sea struck the craft and swamped it, and all the loose freight was floating about in the ocean. There, you see. We'd have had better luck with the women aboard. Such was the exclamation of Pipi-ai-ki-ai-iki. It did not take long to convince the old man, Piki-a-nui, who was captain of the canoe, that he had invited this disaster on himself, the agent of which, as he rightly suspected, was none other than the distinguished-looking young woman who now stood on the beach watching him in his predicament with unperturbed countenance. The two men floated their canoe, collected their baggage, and came ashore. When they had got the stuff dry and stowed in the waist of the craft, they escorted the women aboard, seating Wahine-o-mao as directed by the captain. In the bow near Pele and Hiiaka in the after part, within arm's length of Piki-a-nui, and they put to sea. The canoe was a small affair, unprovided with that central platform, the pola, that might serve as the cabin or quarter-deck, on which the passengers could stretch themselves for comfort. In her weariness, Hiiaka, with her head toward the bow, reclined her body against the top rail of the canoe, thus eking out the insufficiency of the narrow thwart that was her seat, and she fell asleep, or rather entered that borderland of nod, in which the central watchman has not yet given over control of the muscular system, and the ear still maintains its aerial reconnaissance. The wind, meanwhile, as it caromed aft from the triangular sail of Mat, coquetted with her tropical apparel, and made Pau and Kihei shake like summer leaves. The steersman, in whom that precious factor, a chivalrous regard for woman, was even of less value than is common to the savage breast in the pursuit of a fixed purpose, began to direct amorous glances at the prostrate form before him, and to the neglect of his own proper duties. Presently he left his steering and stole up to Hiiaka with privy paw outstretched. Hiiaka roused from her half-dreamy state on the instant, and the man sprang back and resumed his paddle. Hiiaka, with the utmost coolness, expressed in song her remonstrance and sarcastic rebuke for this exhibition of inhospitable rudeness. Ahono ma'ele o I hono-ka-lani, ike awika wa oko aina, e halulu ana meheka nakala. Ka uaku ao ikai, haki kaupaku okahale ika ino, ino ko lao, Translation. With pillowed neck I lay face to heaven. The rain I found beat on my bed, came a tremor like tread of a man, the slap of a rain squall at sea, within the roof tree broken down, my house exposed to the storm, my garden of herbs laid waste. The young man added his protest. Yes, his whole conduct is indeed shameful, scandalous. He hasn't the decency to wait till he gets ashore. In the midst of this unpleasantness, it was a comfort to hear the strong, cheerful voice of her former companion, Pau-palae, calling to her across the stretch of waters. It will be remembered that their roads had parted company some time before Hiiaka had left the big island. The separation had made no change, however, in their mutual affection. O heleanawe ikanoe ikawa, inakiawa hinekapu, ikawa lele maluna. O kalahikio la, o hele ana I. Translation. Like a cloud you fleet by, on the wings of the storm, vision of womanly taboo, of the rain clouds that sweep, or the hill of good luck, may you speed on your way. Hiiaka replied to her kahu's mele in these words. Nohana, inahoaiku, inahohael, ayukau kaliula, aimoewakea. Translation, kinsmen, allies, travel mates, you rest in upland Ka-liu, there taste you midday repose. Perhaps it was that Hiiaka failed to manifest in her carriage and deportment the dignity and taboo that hedges in an aliyah or an akua. Perhaps the rough-hearted Piki-Nui, sailor fashion, deemed himself outside the realm of honor which rules on land. However that might be, as Hiiaka lay decently covered against the cold wind that drew down the flank of Hale-ka-la, this rude fellow, regardless of every punctilio, stole up to Hiiaka and repeated his former attempt. Hiiaka caught his hand in mid-air and administered this rebuke. Oka uiki, mauna ki eki, huki ae, la Na-maka-o-ka-ha'i, hipuhiwi no kai halulu, au anamoku hano ike kai, hi maka no hana, o makakiloya, o ku makakunu a uahopuhia. Translation: Ka uiki, famous in story, while buffeting ocean's blows, aspires to commerce with heaven. Moku Hano's palms that float like a boat in the water are watchful eyes to Hana, alert for the passing school. Your wanton, vagrant eye is caught in the very act. The canoe grated on the shingly beach. The two young women, rejoiced to be free at last from the enforced proximity of shipboard, sprang ashore and with speedy steps put a distance between themselves and the canoe house. "That's right," called out the steersman. "Make haste to find a bath. We'll join you in a short time." Chapter 16. Kapa'ula-kina'u, a relative of Hiiaka, the maimed girl Mana-mana-ia-kalu-ia. The canoemen, having used their utmost expedition in landing the freight and hauling up the canoe and getting it under cover, hastened to meet the two women at the rendezvous they had suggested. But they were nowhere to be found. They had disappeared as completely as though the earth had swallowed them up. When Piki-Nui asked the people of the village as to the whereabouts of the two young women who had just now landed as passengers from the canoe, they one and all denied having set eyes upon them. Hiiaka had planned a visit with her sister Kapo, but on reaching Wailuku, the house was empty. Kapo and her husband Puanui had but just started to make a ceremonious call on Olipau, a famous chief of the district. The receding figure of Kapo was already hazy in the distance, so that it seemed more than doubtful if the words of Hiiaka's message reached the ears for which they were intended. "He ahuihala ko kapoula kinau, ko kapili kaumaha. I kapili a hala la hala hala olua, au he maka-o-ka-ha'i, e kipa aku ai lahoi I ko hele e." Translation: The clustered hala is Kapo's shield, an omen portending disaster. The traveler came in your absence. Both of you gone, no one at home, no lodge for the traveler within, no hospitality within. He awihala nakamaka ni tes. Hala ka wa nohoi na pali e, I ka pali aku I puale he e loli ihola. Pulu eloi ka wa e, au he makamaka e kipa aku ai. I ku hail, I e noho ana ike kai o kapeku. E hulono I kauwalo I. Translation: A hala bunch snatched by the wind that blows from the medicine man, pushing the rain to pualehe. Cold is the traveler and soaking wet, no friend to give welcome and cheer, house empty, gone to the seashore, and no one to heed my entreaty. As Hiiaka passed along the cliff that overlooks the wave-swept beach at Honolulu, a pitiful sight met her eye, the figure of a woman crippled from birth without hands. Yet, in spite of her maimed condition, the brave spirit busied herself gathering shellfish, and when a tumbling wave rolled across the beach, she made herself a partner in its sport and gleefully retreated, skipping and dancing to the words of a song. Aloha wale kaia lama lama kuainala. Kaia kahiko puno me ka wahine. Lilo ke hoa, koe koe ka po. Akahi kona la ao aloha mai. I aloha kona kuaina I ka pohu I. Translation: How dear the torch-caught fish of my homeland, the fish embraced by the women folk. Gone one's companion, chill grows the night. Love cheered for a day, then flew away. O Kona, thou land of peace and of calm, search for the hidden meaning of this place. Wahino Ma'o was greatly fascinated by the pathos and romance of the situation and declared she would like to have her for an aikene, an intimate friend. Hiiaka replied, "Maimed folks seem to be very numerous in these parts. The maimed girl kept up her fishing, her light-hearted dancing and singing. Wa ino honoko hau he ulu o nui ka makani. Ke hai la I ka lau o ka awa. Lai pono ai ke kai o honolua. E hele ka wahine I ke kapa ka hakai. Kui ana I ka opihi. Wawo ana I ka na limu. O mana ia kaluea. Kawahi noa make ii translation. Rough weather at Hono-ko-hau. The ulu all blows a gale. It snaps off the leaves of the awa. But the sea lies calm at Honolua. And the woman can fish along shore. Pounding her shellfish, rubbing her moss. This maimed girl Kalu'i'e, the girl that is dead. As the wild thing ran from the dash of an incoming wave, by some chance the gourd that held her fish slipped from her, and the retreating water carried it beyond her reach, a loss that she lightly touched in her song. Hakalauakaia, hakalima ike poi, hake olo ike awakea, kinai akula ike kai la, lilokaia, ika welalao kulima. A lilo translation. My fish are addons on the waves. My hand just danced from the basket. The skilled one dances at noontide and deafens the roar of ocean. Gone are my fish, lost out of hand, snatched clean away from my hand stumps. They are gone from my hand. There was a shark lurking in the ocean, and when Mana Iakalu saw it, she uttered a little song. Ka'aie ki makai noino, iu meu ka moana, ke aulele kua kai. Ika pua kai uli, awe, pau au, ika mano nui, Translation. Little fish with wicked eye, snub-nosed fish that swims the deep, sordid fish that darts and stabs among the blue sea coral groves. Alas, the shark has done for me, the mighty shark, mine enemy. Wahino Ma'o could not repress her admiration for the girl and her desire to have her as an aikene, an intimate friend. And she was full of regret that their presence on the cliff had driven away the fish and interfered with the girl's occupation. The figure you see dancing down there is not a human body, it is only a spirit, said Hiiaka. What? Yes, only a spirit, and I'll prove it in this way. She plucked a hala droop from a wreath about her neck. I'll throw this down to her, and if she flies away, it will prove she is a spirit. But if she does not disappear, it will prove her to be a human body. Hiiaka threw the hala, and the moment the poor soul saw it fall in front of her, she vanished out of sight. But in a short time she reappeared, and seizing the hala with her fingerless hand stumps, she pressed it to her nose with an extravagant display of fondness, and looking up to Hiiaka, she chanted, No nakahala onini pua iai ke kai, no panai wakahalai, no puna ka wahine, no kalua Translation. The hala, tossed down from